Picture this. It's a warm January evening in Palm Beach, 2017. Beyond the high walls and ornate gates of Mar-a-Lago, flashbulbs pop as limousines glide up the palm-lined driveway. Inside the gilded ballroom, beneath chandeliers dripping with crystal, the President of the United States sits at dinner with the Prime Minister of Japan. Waiters in white gloves move between tables. Club members, who paid $200,000 for the privilege of being here, lean in with their phones, snapping photos of the leader of the free world as he conducts foreign policy over Dover sole and chocolate souffle. Then the news breaks. North Korea has launched a ballistic missile. And right there, in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by paying guests with cameras and social media accounts, the president and his advisors huddle over documents, illuminated by the flashlight app on a staffer's phone. Classified materials. Live crisis management. In a room full of people who bought their way in. This is Mar-a-Lago. Not just a mansion, not just a club, a symbol of wealth, power, access, and all the uncomfortable questions that come with them. Who belongs here? Who pays the real cost? And what happens when a private palace becomes entangled with public power? Tonight, we're going deep into the dark story of America's most controversial mansion. From its origins in Gilded Age ambition to its current life as a political lightning rod, this is the tale of a house that has never stopped demanding attention, resources, and answers. If you're here for more than surface-level tours of pretty rooms, if you want to understand the history, the power, and the hidden costs behind America's grandest estates, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Let's get into it. To understand Mar-a-Lago, you have to understand the woman who willed it into existence, Marjorie Merriweather Post. She was born in 1887, the daughter of C.W. Post, the man who turned breakfast cereal into a fortune. When he died in 1914, Marjorie inherited the Postum Cereal Company. And she didn't just maintain it. She expanded it, transformed it, turned it into General Foods, one of the largest food corporations in America. She was one of the wealthiest women in the country. And she had the ambition, the vision, and the sheer force of will to match her fortune. But here's the thing, money wasn't enough. Not in the 1920s, not in the rarefied world of American high society. Marjorie was new money, the kind of wealth that came from industry, from business, from work. And in the eyes of old money elites, especially those who summered in Newport and wintered in Palm Beach, new money was vulgar, suspect, not quite legitimate. Marjorie knew this. She felt it in the polite snubs, the closed circles, the invisible walls that no amount of wealth could breach. So she decided to do what new money has always done when faced with old money disdain. She would build something so grand, so undeniable, that no one could look away. She would build Mar-a-Lago. In 1924, Marjorie purchased 17 acres of prime land on Palm Beach, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to Lake Worth. It was the only estate on the island that would span from sea to lake, hence the name Mar-a-Lago, sea to lake in Spanish. She hired the best, architect Marion Sims Wyeth, who specialized in Mediterranean revival estates, and the artist and decorator Joseph Urban, who had designed sets for the Metropolitan Opera and the Ziegfeld Follies. She wanted beauty, yes, but she also wanted scale. She wanted awe. Construction began in 1924 and took 3 years. And the scale? Staggering. 128 rooms, 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms, 3 bomb shelters, a 75-foot tower modeled after the Torre del Oro in Seville, gold leaf ceilings, marble imported from Italy, tiles shipped from Spain and Cuba, stone carved by hand, every surface, every detail a testament to wealth, taste, and ambition. But here's what the glossy magazine spreads of the time didn't dwell on: the invisible city beneath the glamour. Because Mar-a-Lago wasn't just ballrooms and bedrooms. Below the surface, literally, there was an entire infrastructure dedicated to making luxury possible. Industrial kitchens, laundry rooms the size of small factories, mechanical rooms humming with generators, boilers, and refrigeration units, storage vaults for silver, china, linens, servants' quarters tucked into corners and upper floors, far from the sight of guests. Marjorie employed dozens of staff, Cooks, maids, butlers, gardeners, chauffeurs, engineers. They lived on-site or nearby, working long hours to keep the estate running. They pressed linens, polished silver, trimmed hedges, served meals, and maintained every gilded surface. They made the fantasy real. And they were, for the most part, invisible. By the 1930s, Mar-a-Lago had become exactly what Marjorie intended: a showpiece, a statement. She hosted some of the most dazzling parties Palm Beach had ever seen: lavish dinners, costume balls, galas that drew senators, ambassadors, movie stars, and European aristocrats. And this was during the Great Depression. Think about that for a moment. Outside the gates of Mar-a-Lago, the country was collapsing. Unemployment hit 25%. Breadlines stretched for blocks. Families lost homes, farms, savings. Desperation was everywhere. But inside Mar-a-Lago, champagne flowed. Orchestras played. Guests dined on imported delicacies beneath hand-painted ceilings. It was a world unto itself, insulated, luminous, untouchable. Marjorie wasn't oblivious to the suffering outside. She was, by many accounts, personally generous. She funded charities. She supported the arts. She donated to relief efforts. But the optics were undeniable. While millions struggled to survive, she was living in a palace. And the people who made that palace function, the cooks who prepared 10-course meals, the maids who cleaned 128 rooms, the gardeners who maintained 17 acres of tropical landscaping, they were working class. Many were immigrants. They worked long hours for modest wages. They ate different food, used different entrances, lived in different quarters. The same roof, but two entirely different worlds. This is the tension that runs through the entire history of Mar-a-Lago and through the history of American wealth itself. Beauty built on labor. Glamour made possible by invisible hands. A dream for some, a job for others. The 1940s brought war. Marjorie, ever the patriot, wanted Mar-a-Lago to serve the nation. She offered it to the government as a convalescent home for wounded soldiers. The offer was politely declined. Too grand, too impractical, too expensive to maintain. So the estate remained hers. She continued to host, though the war years brought a more subdued energy. Blackout curtains went up. Guests were fewer. The world outside was darker. But Marjorie still loved Mar-a-Lago fiercely. It was her masterpiece, her refuge, her statement to the world that she had arrived, and that she mattered. After the war, Marjorie kept coming back to Palm Beach every winter. She was older now, but still active, still hosting, still committed to the life she had built. But the cracks were starting to show, not in the marble or the gold leaf, but in the economics. Mar-a-Lago was staggeringly expensive to run. Heating and cooling a 128-room mansion in Florida, maintaining acres of gardens, employing a full-time staff, repairing roofs, repainting walls, replacing aging mechanical systems. Even for someone as wealthy as Marjorie, the costs were mounting. And her children? They didn't want it. They had their own lives, their own homes, their own priorities. The idea of inheriting Mar-a-Lago wasn't a gift. It was a burden. A beautiful, glittering, suffocating burden. So Marjorie began to think about legacy. What would happen to Mar-a-Lago after she was gone? She couldn't bear the thought of it being demolished or carved up into condos. She wanted it preserved. She wanted it to matter. And she had an idea. In 1973, when Marjorie Merriweather Post died at the age of 86, her will contained a surprising clause. She left Mar-a-Lago to the United States government, not as a museum, not as a tourist attraction, as a winter White House, a place where presidents could escape Washington, host foreign dignitaries, and conduct diplomacy in the warmth and beauty of Palm Beach. It was a grand, patriotic gesture, and it was completely impractical. Here's why. The estate, while stunning, was a logistical nightmare. Security alone was a massive problem. The property sat on an island accessible by just a few bridges. It had ocean and lake frontage, which meant securing the waterways. It had 128 rooms, most of which weren't necessary for official government use. And it was expensive. Maintaining Mar-a-Lago cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, equivalent to millions today. Staff, utilities, repairs, landscaping, insurance. The costs never stopped. The government tried. For a few years, they kept it open. But no president used it. Richard Nixon didn't visit. Gerald Ford didn't visit. Jimmy Carter didn't visit. It sat there, empty and expensive, a white elephant with gold leaf ceilings. By 1980, the National Park Service, which had been managing the property, issued a report. Mar-a-Lago was too costly to maintain, too difficult to secure, and too impractical to serve as a functional government facility. In 1981, the government officially returned Mar-a-Lago to the Post Foundation. The dream of a winter White House was over, and the mansion sat empty. Now we come to the chapter that transformed Mar-a-Lago from a fading relic into a political and cultural flashpoint. In the early 1980s, Mar-a-Lago was in limbo. The Post Foundation didn't want to maintain it. Potential buyers were scarce. Who could afford to operate a 128-room mansion? Enter Donald Trump. Trump, at the time, was a young New York real estate developer making a name for himself with bold deals and even bolder publicity. He was rich, brash, and always looking for the next trophy property. And Mar-a-Lago? It was the ultimate trophy. But the initial asking price was $20 million. Trump balked. He thought it was too much. So he did what he did best. He played hardball. First, he bought the beach parcel directly in front of Mar-a-Lago, the strip of land between the estate and the ocean. He let it be known that he planned to build a large house right there, blocking the ocean view from the mansion. The value of Mar-a-Lago plummeted. Then, in 1985, Trump swooped in and bought the estate for just $5 million, plus another $3 million for the furnishings. An absurd bargain for one of the grandest properties in America. Trump moved in. He renovated. He redecorated. Lots of gold, lots of mirrors, lots of chandeliers. He threw parties. He courted celebrities. He turned Mar-a-Lago into a personal brand asset, a stage for his growing public persona. But even for Trump, the costs were crushing. Maintaining Mar-a-Lago was bleeding money. He needed a new model. In 1995, Trump made the move that would define Mar-a-Lago's modern identity. He converted it into a private club. Here's how it worked. Members paid an initiation fee, initially $25,000, later raised to $100,000, and eventually to $200,000 after Trump became president. On top of that, annual dues ran around $14,000. In exchange, members got access to the estate, the dining rooms, the ballrooms, the pool, the beach. They could host events, bring guests, and rub elbows with Trump himself. It was a brilliant business model. Trump offloaded the maintenance costs onto the members, who were essentially paying for the privilege of keeping the estate operational. He turned a financial liability into a profit center. And he created something even more valuable than money: access. Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a club. It was a symbol, a place where wealth, power, and proximity intersected. You didn't just join for the amenities. You joined to be seen, to be connected, to be part of Trump's world. And it worked. The club thrived. Membership lists filled with real estate moguls, hedge fund managers, socialites, and, later, political donors and operatives. But the conversion also meant something else. Mar-a-Lago was no longer a private home. It was a business, a semi-public space. And that distinction would become critically important in the years to come. In November 2016, Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. And suddenly, Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a club anymore. It became, informally but unmistakably, the Winter White House. Trump spent nearly every weekend and holiday at Mar-a-Lago during his presidency. He hosted foreign leaders there: Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Chinese President Xi Jinping. He held meetings, made phone calls, conducted diplomacy. He turned the estate into an extension of the Oval Office. But here's the problem. It was still a private club. Members were still paying for access. Guests were still dining in the same rooms where national security decisions were being made. and the lines between public office and private business were blurring in ways that made a lot of people deeply uncomfortable. Let's go back to that January 2017 dinner with Prime Minister Abe. The two leaders were dining on the Mar-a-Lago terrace, surrounded by club members. Then the news broke. North Korea had launched a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan. A serious, urgent national security crisis. And what happened? Right there, in the open-air dining area, Trump and Abe huddled with advisors. Aides brought documents. Someone used a phone flashlight to read them. Club members watched. Some took photos and posted them on social media. Within hours, images and details were circulating online. The name of the military officer carrying the nuclear football. The face of a senior aide. Real-time commentary from people who paid $200,000 to be in the room. Security experts were horrified. Ethics watchdogs raised alarms. The optics were terrible. Foreign policy conducted in front of paying customers. Classified information handled in a semi-public space. The White House defended it. Trump's team said it was no different from any other presidential retreat. But it was different. Camp David, the traditional presidential retreat, is a secure government facility. Mar-a-Lago was a private club where the president happened to be the owner. The ethical concerns multiplied. Every time Trump visited Mar-a-Lago, taxpayers footed the bill for Secret Service protection, Coast Guard patrols, local law enforcement, and air traffic control. Estimates put the cost of each visit at around $3 million. Over 4 years, Trump made more than 25 trips to Mar-a-Lago, costing taxpayers close to $100 million in security and logistics. And where did the Secret Service stay? At Mar-a-Lago, in rooms rented from the Trump Organization. Where did staff and security personnel eat? At Mar-a-Lago restaurants. The president's private business was billing the federal government for the costs of protecting the president. It wasn't illegal, but it was uncomfortable. And it raised a question that haunts Mar-a-Lago to this day, when the personal and the political occupy the same space. Who really benefits, and who pays the price? Trump's presidency was a goldmine for Mar-a-Lago. Membership applications surged. The initiation fee doubled from $100,000 to $200,000 in January 2017, right after the election. Demand was off the charts. Why? Because Mar-a-Lago offered something no other club in the world could: proximity to the President of the United States. If you were a member, you could run into Trump at dinner. You could play golf with him. You could introduce yourself, pitch an idea, ask for a favor, take a photo. You weren't just paying for tennis courts and a fancy pool. You were paying for access to power. And people paid. Business people, lobbyists, foreign nationals with interests in U.S. policy, political donors. It was networking on steroids. But this also meant that Mar-a-Lago became a magnet for influence peddling concerns. Ethics groups filed complaints. Journalists investigated. Stories emerged of club members receiving government appointments, of foreign officials booking events at Mar-a-Lago to curry favor, of policy discussions happening over shrimp cocktail on the terrace. Was it corruption? Legally, often no. Was it a problem? Many argued yes, that the intermingling of private profit and public power created conflicts of interest that no administration should tolerate. Trump dismissed the criticism. He said he was entitled to run his businesses, entitled to spend time at his own property, entitled to host whomever he wanted. And his base largely agreed. To them, Mar-a-Lago was a symbol of success, not scandal. But to critics, it was a symbol of something darker, a government for sale, policy shaped by whoever could afford the membership fee. In January 2021, after losing the 2020 election, Donald Trump left Washington and moved to Mar-a-Lago permanently. He set up an office. He held meetings. He hosted political allies and donors. He started planning his political future. But there was a problem, a legal one. When Trump converted Mar-a-Lago into a club in the 1990s, he signed an agreement with the town of Palm Beach. The agreement allowed the property to operate as a club, but it also included restrictions. Specifically, no one could live at Mar-a-Lago for more than 3 non-consecutive weeks per year. The agreement was designed to prevent Mar-a-Lago from becoming a full-time residence. It was a club, not a home. But now Trump was living there, permanently. The town received complaints from residents. Some were political. Trump's neighbors didn't want the media circus, the security presence, the protests. But the legal argument was clear. Trump was violating the 1993 agreement. Trump's lawyers responded that he was living in a separate residential section of the estate, not in the club itself. They argued he wasn't technically a club member, living on the property. The town investigated, but ultimately didn't take aggressive enforcement action. So Trump stayed. And Mar-a-Lago became his base of operations, part home, part office, part political command center. But staying there would have consequences. In early 2022, it became public knowledge that Trump had taken boxes of materials with him when he left the White House. Presidential records, documents that, by law, are supposed to be turned over to the National Archives. The National Archives spent months negotiating with Trump's team. In January 2022, Trump returned 15 boxes of materials. But when archivists reviewed the contents, they found something alarming: classified documents. Some marked top secret. Some related to national security, intelligence reports, defense information, materials that should never have left secured government facilities. The National Archives referred the matter to the Department of Justice. The DOJ opened an investigation, and they learned that there were likely more classified documents still at Mar-a-Lago. In June 2022, federal investigators visited Mar-a-Lago. Trump's lawyers handed over additional classified materials and signed a statement certifying that all documents had been returned. But the DOJ wasn't convinced. They had evidence suggesting that wasn't true, that more documents remained at the estate, and that there had been efforts to conceal them. So on August 8, 2022, the FBI executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. It was unprecedented. A former president's home searched by federal agents. The images, FBI vehicles outside the gates, agents inside the estate, dominated the news cycle for weeks. And what did they find? More than 11,000 documents. Over 100 classified documents, including materials marked at the highest levels of classification. Documents stored in Trump's office, in a storage room, in his residence. Some in boxes stacked in a bathroom. The revelations were stunning. This wasn't a filing error. This was a massive, sustained retention of classified information in an unsecured private club. The legal and political fallout was immediate. Trump's allies called it a raid, a political witch hunt, an abuse of power. His critics called it a necessary enforcement of the law, that no one, not even a former president, was above it. In June 2023, a federal grand jury indicted Donald Trump on 37 counts related to the mishandling of classified documents. The charges included willful retention of national defense information, conspiracy to obstruct justice, withholding documents, false statements. The indictment alleged that Trump not only kept the documents, but actively resisted returning them, that he directed staff to move boxes, that he suggested his lawyer hide or destroy materials, that he lied to investigators. And all of this happened at Mar-a-Lago. The indictment painted a detailed picture of the estate as the scene of the alleged crimes. Security camera footage, employee testimony, descriptions of storage rooms cluttered with boxes, images of classified documents spread out on the floor of Trump's office, on his desk, in a ballroom storage area. Mar-a-Lago, the symbol of opulence and access, was now also the scene of a federal criminal case. Trump pleaded not guilty. He called the charges politically motivated. His legal team argued that he had the authority to declassify materials, that the Presidential Records Act gave him broad discretion, that the prosecution was selective and unfair. The case moved slowly through the courts, entangled in pretrial motions, disputes over classified evidence, and the complexities of prosecuting a former president who was also running for office again. As of now, the case remains unresolved. But regardless of the legal outcome, the scandal has cemented Mar-a-Lago's place in history, not just as a mansion, but as a flashpoint in the ongoing struggle over power, accountability, and the rule of law. Let's take a step back and think about what Mar-a-Lago actually is in 2024. It's a private club with hundreds of members. It hosts weddings, galas, charity events. People come and go constantly. Guests, members, catering staff, vendors, valets, musicians. It's bustling. It's social. It's semi-public. And it's also the home of a former president who is under federal indictment, who has Secret Service protection for life, and who is running for president again. Those two realities don't fit together easily. Security at Mar-a-Lago is a nightmare. The Secret Service has to protect Trump while he lives in a space where hundreds of people have access. They have to vet members, monitor guests, secure entrances and exits, patrol the waterways. They have to operate in an environment that was never designed to be a secure government facility. And they're doing it at taxpayer expense. Even after Trump left office, the Secret Service is required to protect him. When he's at Mar-a-Lago, that means a constant security presence, agents on site, equipment installed, perimeter defenses maintained. The costs don't stop. Neither do the risks. In 2019, a Chinese woman was arrested at Mar-a-Lago carrying multiple phones, a laptop, and a thumb drive containing malware. She had gained entry by claiming to be a member going to the pool. She wasn't. The incident raised serious questions about how easy it was to breach security at the estate. There have been other breaches. Drones flying overhead. Intruders on the grounds. Each incident a reminder that Mar-a-Lago, for all its walls and guards, is not a fortress. It's a club. And clubs by nature are porous. There's another shadow hanging over Mar-a-Lago, one that has nothing to do with politics or classified documents: climate change. Palm Beach sits just a few feet above sea level. Mar-a-Lago is even lower. Much of the estate is less than 10 feet above the ocean. And the ocean is rising. Over the past century, sea levels in South Florida have risen about a foot. Over the next century, projections suggest they could rise another 3 to 6 feet, possibly more if polar ice sheets melt faster than expected. That means flooding. Regular, worsening flooding. Not just during hurricanes, but during high tides, so-called sunny day flooding, that inundates streets and properties even when the weather is calm. Mar-a-Lago is already vulnerable. During Hurricane Irma in 2017, the estate suffered damage, flooding, roof leaks, downed trees. During Hurricane Ian in 2022, the property was again battered. The protective seawalls help, but they won't hold forever. Climate scientists have warned that much of Palm Beach could be underwater by the end of the century. Mar-a-Lago, this symbol of wealth and permanence, is built on sand, literally and metaphorically. Marjorie Merriweather Post built it to last forever. But nature, it seems, has other plans. Let's talk about the people who keep Mar-a-Lago running today. Because just as in Marjorie's time, the mansion cannot function without them. Cooks, servers, housekeepers, groundskeepers, maintenance workers, valets, security personnel, event coordinators. Mar-a-Lago employs dozens of people, many of them immigrants, many of them working long hours for wages that are modest compared to the wealth that surround them. They serve meals at the club. They clean rooms. They maintain the pool, the gardens, the infrastructure. They work behind the scenes, largely unseen by members and guests, making sure the fantasy of luxury holds together. And their stories echo the stories of the workers from the 1930s. The same power imbalance, the same class divide, the same labor that makes opulence possible. In recent years, there have been reports of labor violations at Mar-a-Lago, undocumented workers employed by contractors, wage disputes, poor working conditions. Trump's businesses have faced lawsuits and fines related to labor practices. It's a reminder that the grandeur of places like Mar-a-Lago is never self-sustaining. It rests on the backs of people who are rarely part of the story until something goes wrong. So what is Mar-a-Lago? A mansion? A club? A business? A home? A crime scene? A symbol? The answer, uncomfortably, is all of the above. Mar-a-Lago is a mirror. It reflects back whatever we bring to it. If you admire Trump, Mar-a-Lago is a symbol of success, a beautiful estate, a thriving business, a gathering place for people who appreciate excellence and aren't ashamed of wealth. If you distrust Trump, Mar-a-Lago is a symbol of corruption, a place where public office and private profit blurred, where access was for sale, where laws were allegedly broken. If you care about history, Mar-a-Lago is a relic of the Gilded Age, a monument to an era when the ultra-wealthy built palaces to prove their worth, when new money tried to buy old legitimacy, when beauty and inequality existed side by side. If you care about class, Mar-a-Lago is a reminder of who builds and who benefits, the invisible workers who make luxury possible, the quiet labor that never makes it into the glossy photos. If you care about climate change, Mar-a-Lago is a warning, a symbol of impermanence, of humanity's hubris in the face of nature, of a future where even the grandest estates may be reclaimed by the sea. Mar-a-Lago is all of these things, and that's what makes it so endlessly fascinating and so deeply uncomfortable. Because at its core, Mar-a-Lago asks a question that America has never fully answered. What do we owe each other? Marjorie Merriweather Post built her mansion to belong, to matter, to leave a legacy. She gave it to the nation, hoping it would serve the public good. The nation gave it back, unable to afford the dream. Donald Trump bought it, made it profitable, turned it into a brand. He used it as a stage, a symbol, and eventually, a base of power. And in doing so, he turned it into something even more complicated, something that revealed the fractures in American society, the fractures between public and private, between wealth and work, between accountability and impunity, between what we say we value and what we actually reward. Let's sit with some of those contradictions. Luxury and labor. Mar-a-Lago is beautiful. The architecture is stunning. The grounds are immaculate. The history is rich. But that beauty doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists because of labor that is often invisible, undervalued, and precarious. Every gilded surface, every perfect lawn, every flawless event is the result of human effort. And the people doing that work are not the people being celebrated when you read about Mar-a-Lago in glossy magazines or political scandals. Private property and public power. When Trump was president, Mar-a-Lago functioned as an extension of the White House. Foreign policy was conducted there. National security decisions were made there. But it was still a private club. Members paid for access. Trump's business profited. Taxpayers funded the security. The lines between personal wealth and public service dissolved. And the result was a system where the wealthy and connected had proximity to power in ways that ordinary citizens never could. Preservation and profit. Marjorie wanted Mar-a-Lago preserved. She wanted it to serve the nation, to endure as a symbol of American achievement. But the nation couldn't afford to preserve it. So it fell into private hands, and private hands did what they do. They monetized it. Trump saved Mar-a-Lago from demolition, but he also transformed it into a business, a brand, a transactional space. It's preserved, yes, but at what cost? And for whose benefit? Legitimacy and law. Trump used Mar-a-Lago to project legitimacy, to host world leaders, to conduct diplomacy, to act presidential even after leaving office. But Mar-a-Lago is also the site of alleged crimes. Classified documents stored improperly, obstruction of justice, violations of the Presidential Records Act, the estate that symbolized power also. Became the scene of a scandal about the abuse of power. And the question it raises is this: if you're rich enough, powerful enough, connected enough, do the rules apply to you? These contradictions aren't unique to Mar-a-Lago. They're American contradictions. But Mar-a-Lago makes them visible in a way that's hard to ignore. Let's be clear, Mar-a-Lago is political now. Not just because Trump owns it, but because it has become a symbol in the broader culture war. To Trump's supporters, Mar-a-Lago represents resilience, success, and defiance. It's the place where Trump regroups, where he hosts allies, where he plans his political comeback. When the FBI searched the estate, his supporters rallied outside the gates, waving flags and chanting. Mar-a-Lago became a kind of pilgrimage site, a symbol of resistance against what they see as an overreaching, politically motivated establishment. To Trump's critics, Mar-a-Lago represents everything wrong with concentrations of wealth and power. It's a symbol of corruption, of the erosion of democratic norms, of a system where the rich and powerful play by different rules. The search wasn't an attack, it was accountability. And the document scandal wasn't a witch hunt. It was a legitimate investigation into serious violations of the law. Both sides see Mar-a-Lago through their own lens. And in a polarized country, those lenses produce completely different images. But here's what gets lost in the politics: the human cost. The workers who staff Mar-a-Lago don't have the luxury of seeing it as a symbol. For them, it's a job, a paycheck, a way to pay rent, feed their families, survive. They don't get to weigh in on the ethics of classified documents or the propriety of mixing business and government. They just keep the place running. The neighbors in Palm Beach don't have the luxury of ignoring it. They deal with the traffic, the security, the media presence, the protests. They see their town transformed into a political battleground every time Trump is in the news. And the taxpayers, all of us, don't have the luxury of opting out. We pay for the Secret Service. We pay for the Coast Guard patrols. We pay for the infrastructure and the logistics and the security apparatus that makes Mar-a-Lago, as the home of a former president, possible. So when we talk about Mar-a-Lago, we're not just talking about a mansion or a club or a scandal. We're talking about a system of wealth, power, access, and obligation. And we're asking, is this the system we want? What can we learn from Mar-a-Lago? First, wealth doesn't buy legitimacy, but it buys a lot of other things. Marjorie Merriweather Post built Mar-a-Lago to be accepted by old money society. She succeeded to a degree, but the acceptance was always conditional, always tinged with the knowledge that her money was new, that her place at the table was bought, not inherited. Trump, in his own way, faced the same dynamic. He bought Mar-a-Lago to project status, to host elites, to claim a place in high society. And again, it worked to a degree. But respect and legitimacy are not the same as access and visibility. You can own the grandest estate in the country and still be an outsider. Second, preservation has a price, and someone always has to pay it. Marjorie wanted Mar-a-Lago to last forever. But forever is expensive. The government couldn't pay. The Post Foundation couldn't pay. Trump found a way to make others pay, through membership fees, through club dues, through leveraging the estate as a brand asset. But that model comes with its own costs: loss of privacy, ethical complications, public scrutiny. Nothing is preserved for free. And the question is always, who pays, and is it worth it? Third, power is intoxicating and dangerous. Mar-a-Lago gave Trump something beyond wealth: proximity to global power, even after leaving office. He hosted world leaders there. He held court with political allies and donors. He used it as a stage to project strength and relevance. But that power came with risks: legal risks, ethical risks, security risks. The more power concentrates in private hands, the more vulnerable it becomes to abuse. And the more blurred the lines between personal and public, the harder it becomes to hold anyone accountable. Fourth, labor is invisible until it isn't. Mar-a-Lago runs on the labor of dozens of workers: cooks, cleaners, gardeners, servers. They are essential to the estate's function, but they are rarely part of the story. They are invisible until there's a scandal, a labor violation, an immigration raid, a lawsuit. The same was true in Marjorie's time, and it's true today. The lesson is this: luxury is not self-sustaining. It rests on the backs of workers whose contributions are undervalued and underappreciated. If we want to understand places like Mar-a-Lago, we have to see the labor that makes them possible. Fifth, climate change doesn't care about your wealth. Mar-a-Lago is one of the most valuable private properties in America. It has seawalls, generators, hurricane shutters, and all the resources money can buy. But none of that will save it from rising seas in the long run. Climate change is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how powerful you are, how well-connected you are. If the ocean rises, it rises for everyone. Mar-a-Lago is a reminder that wealth can delay consequences, but it can't erase them. Sixth, symbols are powerful and contested. Mar-a-Lago means different things to different people. To some, it's a symbol of success and resilience. To others, it's a symbol of corruption and inequality. To some, it's a beautiful piece of history. To others, it's a monument to excess and injustice. And in a deeply divided country, those competing meanings matter. They shape how we see wealth, power, and justice. They shape what we think is acceptable and what we think is outrageous. Symbols don't just reflect our values, they shape them. As of now, the document's case against Trump is still pending. Legal experts expect it to take years to resolve, through trials, appeals, and possibly all the way to the Supreme Court. If Trump is convicted, he could face prison time, but he could also continue to run for president. There is no constitutional prohibition against a convicted felon running for or holding the presidency. The situation is unprecedented legally and politically, and Mar-a-Lago will remain at the center of it. The estate is evidence. Security footage from Mar-a-Lago has been subpoenaed. Employee testimony from the estate is part of the case. The physical layout of the storage rooms, the office, the residence, all of it is relevant to the charges. If Trump wins the presidency again, Mar-a-Lago will almost certainly return to its role as the Winter White House. And all of the ethical, security, and legal questions will resurface, amplified. If he loses, or if he's convicted and barred from holding office, Mar-a-Lago will remain his base. But its political significance may fade. It may return to being what Trump originally intended, a private club, a luxury brand, a piece of real estate. Or it may become something else entirely, a historical site, a museum, a monument to a tumultuous era in American politics. The future is uncertain. But one thing is clear, Mar-a-Lago's story is not over. It's worth pausing to think about what it's like to live near Mar-a-Lago. Palm Beach is a small, wealthy island town. It's known for its beauty, its exclusivity, its quiet, genteel lifestyle. It's a place where billionaires retire, where old money vacations, where the pace is slow and the politics are traditionally understated. And then Mar-a-Lago became the Winter White House. Suddenly, the island was flooded with Secret Service agents, police, Coast Guard boats, helicopters, media trucks, and protesters. Streets were closed. Traffic was rerouted. Security checkpoints went up. The quiet, exclusive enclave became a circus. Some residents were furious. They complained to the town council. They filed lawsuits. They argued that Trump's presence was disrupting their lives and lowering their property values. They didn't sign up to live next to a political command center. Other residents were supportive. They saw Trump as a neighbor, a member of the community, someone who had every right to be there. They argued that the criticism was politically motivated and unfair. The division was stark, and it mirrored the division in the country. Palm Beach, like America, was split over Mar-a-Lago. And the split wasn't just political, it was about values, about what kind of community people wanted to live in, about whether wealth and power entitled you to disrupt the lives of others. The town itself struggled to manage the situation. Law enforcement was stretched thin. Costs for security and traffic management soared. The town didn't get reimbursed by the federal government for most of those expenses. Palm Beach taxpayers absorbed the burden. It's a pattern we've seen before: private gain, public cost. Trump benefited from being at Mar-a-Lago. His brand benefited. His business benefited. But the town paid the price, financially, socially, and politically. And the lesson is this: when private wealth and public power collide, the costs are rarely borne by the people who benefit most. Mar-a-Lago has also become a fixture in popular culture, referenced in late-night comedy, satirized in political cartoons, featured in documentaries and investigative journalism. It's shorthand. When you say Mar-a-Lago, you're not just talking about a building. You're invoking a whole set of associations: wealth, power, scandal, controversy, Trump. It's been the subject of books, both flattering and critical. Documentaries have explored its history, its transformation, its role in Trump's political rise. Journalists have staked it out, interviewed former employees, analyzed its finances, and it's been a backdrop for some of the most memorable and troubling moments of the Trump presidency. The North Korea dinner, the meetings with foreign leaders, the classified document search. Mar-a-Lago is no longer just a place. It's a character in the ongoing American political drama, a symbol loaded with meaning, contested and reinterpreted with every new scandal, every new headline. Let's not forget the human stories, because beyond the politics and the scandals, real people have lived and worked at Mar-a-Lago. Marjorie Merriweather Post lived there for decades. It was her winter home, her sanctuary, her proudest achievement. She hosted friends, family, diplomats, artists. She filled it with her collections, art, antiques, china, silver. She walked the gardens. She sat by the ocean. She loved it deeply. And when she died, she left it to the nation, hoping it would be treasured the way she treasured it. The staff who worked for Marjorie, many of them spent years, even decades, at Mar-a-Lago. They raised families on the wages they earned there. They took pride in their work, in keeping the estate beautiful. They were part of the fabric of the place, even if their names are largely forgotten. Trump has lived there on and off since 1985. He raised his youngest son, Barron, partly at Mar-a-Lago. He hosted his wedding to Melania there. He spent holidays there. For all the business and politics, it's also been his home. The current staff, the cooks, servers, housekeepers, many of them are immigrants. Some are from Latin America, the Caribbean, Eastern Europe. They work long hours, often for modest pay. They navigate the demands of wealthy, powerful members. They deal with the scrutiny that comes with working for Trump. Their stories are not often told, but they are part of Mar-a-Lago's story, just as much as the headlines and the scandals. And the members, hundreds of them, are also part of the story. They paid for access, and they got it. Some are Trump loyalists, some are social climbers, some are just wealthy people who wanted to belong to an exclusive club. They dine there, celebrate there, network there. For them, Mar-a-Lago is a perk, a privilege, a status symbol. All of these people, from Marjorie to the current dishwasher in the kitchen, are woven into the fabric of Mar-a-Lago. And their stories remind us that no place is just a symbol. It's also a collection of human lives, human choices, human labor. From a purely architectural standpoint, Mar-a-Lago is significant. It's one of the finest examples of Mediterranean revival architecture in America. The craftsmanship is extraordinary: hand-carved stone, imported tiles, custom ironwork, gold leaf ceilings. The design is cohesive and grand. The setting, spanning from ocean to lake, is unique. If Mar-a-Lago were just a museum, there would be little controversy. It would be celebrated as a historic estate, a window into the Gilded Age, a testament to early 20th century craftsmanship and ambition. But it's not just a museum. It's a business. It's a political symbol. It's a legal flashpoint. So the question becomes, should Mar-a-Lago be preserved? And if so, how? Historic preservationists argue yes, that the estate is too significant to lose, that it should be protected for future generations. But preservation comes with strings. Restrictions on alterations, requirements for maintenance, limits on commercial use. Trump has resisted those kinds of restrictions in the past. Others argue that Mar-a-Lago's current use, as a private club, is a form of preservation. It's economically sustainable. It's maintained. It's accessible to members. It's alive, not frozen in time. Still others argue that Mar-a-Lago should be taken out of private hands entirely, turned into a public museum, a historic site, a space that serves the community rather than a select few. There's no easy answer, but the tension between preservation and use, between public interest and private ownership, is at the heart of Mar-a-Lago's future. Mar-a-Lago is not unique in the world of the super-rich. Across the globe, billionaires own estates, compounds, islands. They build private clubs, exclusive resorts, gated enclaves. They create spaces that are insulated from the public, accessible only to the wealthy and connected. And those spaces raise the same questions Mar-a-Lago raises, about inequality, about access, about the concentration of wealth and power in private hands. In the UK, There are historic estates owned by aristocratic families, maintained through trusts, tourism, and commercial ventures. In Russia and China, oligarchs and political elites own palaces that are symbols of power and corruption. In the Middle East, royal families build mega-resorts and luxury compounds. Mar-a-Lago fits into this global pattern. It's a space where wealth creates its own reality, where the rules, the norms, the constraints that apply to ordinary people don't quite apply. But Mar-a-Lago also highlights something specific to America: the blurring of private wealth and public power in a democracy. In authoritarian states, that blurring is expected, even codified. But in a democracy, it's a violation of norms and, potentially, laws. Mar-a-Lago asks, what happens when democratic ideals collide with capitalist realities? What happens when the people with the most money have the most access to political power? And what do we do about it? Let's return to the ocean. Mar-a-Lago sits on the edge of the Atlantic, in one of the most vulnerable coastal areas in the United States. South Florida is ground zero for climate change impacts. Rising seas, intensifying hurricanes, increased flooding, saltwater intrusion into freshwater supplies. Scientists project that by 2100, much of South Florida could be underwater, including Palm Beach. Mar-a-Lago has already faced hurricanes. In 2017, Hurricane Irma caused significant damage. In 2022, Hurricane Ian again battered the estate. Each storm is a reminder of the power of nature and the limits of human defenses. Trump has invested in seawalls, drainage systems, and hurricane proofing. But those measures are temporary fixes. They can delay flooding, reduce damage, buy time. But they can't stop the ocean from rising. And here's the irony. Trump has repeatedly denied or downplayed climate change. His administration rolled back environmental protections, withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement, promoted fossil fuel production. But his own property is at direct risk from the very phenomenon he dismissed. It's a metaphor for the broader climate crisis. The people with the most resources to protect themselves are often the ones most responsible for the problem. And the people with the least resources will suffer the most. Mar-a-Lago may survive another few decades, but its long-term future is uncertain. And when it's gone, whether destroyed by a hurricane or slowly reclaimed by the sea, it will be a symbol of something else: the impermanence of human ambition in the face of nature. At its core, the story of Mar-a-Lago is about a question we've been dancing around this entire time. What do we owe each other? Marjorie Merriweather Post believed she owed the nation something. So she gave Mar-a-Lago to the government, hoping it would serve the public good. But the nation decided it didn't owe her the expense of maintaining her dream. So it gave the estate back. Trump believed he owed himself success, wealth, status. So he bought Mar-a-Lago, made it profitable, used it to project power. But in doing so, he shifted costs onto taxpayers, onto his neighbors, onto the workers who kept the estate running. The members of Mar-a-Lago believe they owe themselves access, connection, luxury. They pay for it. But their payments don't cover the full cost, not the security, not the infrastructure, not the social burden on the community. The workers at Mar-a-Lago owe their labor. They give it, often for modest compensation, often without recognition. And what do they get in return? A paycheck, no ownership, no voice, no share in the glamour or the power. The neighbors owe what? Tolerance? Acceptance? They didn't choose to live next to a political flashpoint, but they're expected to bear the disruption. And the rest of us, the taxpayers, the citizens, we owe what? Our tax dollars fund the Secret Service, the Coast Guard, the security apparatus that makes Trump's life at Mar-a-Lago possible. We didn't choose that, but we pay for it. So, what do we owe each other? Do we owe the wealthy the freedom to do whatever they want with their property, even if it disrupts communities and costs the public money? Do we owe workers fair wages, dignity, recognition for the labor that makes luxury possible? Do we owe the public transparency and accountability when private spaces become sites of political power? Do we owe future generations a livable planet, even if it means limiting the ambitions and consumption of the rich today? These aren't abstract questions. Mar-a-Lago makes them concrete. Where does Mar-a-Lago go from here? Let's imagine 3 possible futures. Future 1. The political monument. In this future, Trump remains a dominant political figure, whether as president again, as a kingmaker in the Republican Party, or as a cultural icon. Mar-a-Lago continues to serve as his base, his brand, his symbol. It hosts rallies, fundraisers, meetings with foreign leaders. It's a pilgrimage site for supporters, a target for critics. Security remains tight. Taxpayers continue to fund protection. The estate becomes permanently entangled with politics. When Trump eventually passes, Mar-a-Lago becomes a museum or a political shrine, depending on your perspective. It's preserved, maintained, and visited by historians, tourists, and political pilgrims. It becomes the Trump Library, the Mar-a-Lago Center for American Greatness, or something similar. The story of Trump, his presidency, and his legacy is told through the rooms and grounds of the estate. In this future, Mar-a-Lago never escapes politics. It's forever Trump's house, Trump's symbol, Trump's monument. Future 2. The return to quiet luxury. In this future, Trump's political influence fades. The legal cases are resolved, either through conviction, acquittal, or settlement. The classified documents scandal becomes a historical footnote. Mar-a-Lago returns to being what it was in the 1990s and early 2000s, a private club for the wealthy. Membership is still exclusive. The parties are still lavish. The estate is still beautiful. But the media circus dies down. The protesters leave. The security presence shrinks. Palm Beach returns to its quiet, genteel rhythms. Mar-a-Lago becomes, once again, a place for the rich to see and be seen. Nothing more, nothing less. It's preserved because it's profitable. It's maintained because members pay for the privilege. It's a luxury brand, a status symbol, a piece of architectural history. In this future, Mar-a-Lago becomes what Marjorie might have wanted, a beautiful, exclusive space, alive, but insulated from the messiness of the wider world. Future 3. The Reckoning. In this future, the forces bearing down on Mar-a-Lago, legal, financial, environmental, become too much. The legal cases drag on. Fines accumulate. Assets are seized. Trump's businesses face financial pressure. The cost of maintaining Mar-a-Lago becomes unsustainable. Or a major hurricane hits. The storm surge overwhelms the seawalls. The estate is flooded, damaged beyond easy repair. Insurance companies balk at the cost. Climate change makes rebuilding impractical. Or the political backlash intensifies. Protests become constant. Members resign. The brand is tainted. The club can't sustain itself financially. In this future, Mar-a-Lago is sold. Maybe it's bought by a developer and converted into luxury condos. Maybe it's bought by a nonprofit and turned into a museum. Maybe it's bought by the government, finally, and preserved as a historic site. Or maybe it's not preserved at all. Maybe it's demolished and the land is redeveloped. Maybe the ocean takes it, and in 50 years, Mar-a-Lago is just a memory, a ruin beneath the waves. In this future, Mar-a-Lago's story ends not with triumph, but with reckoning, a symbol of impermanence, hubris, and the consequences of ignoring limits. Which future comes to pass? No one knows, but all 3 are possible. And the path Mar-a-Lago takes will tell us something important about America, about how we handle wealth, power, accountability, and change. Mar-a-Lago is not just a house. It's a lens. Through it, we can see the whole architecture of American inequality, the way wealth insulates and isolates, the way power concentrates and compounds, the way labor is essential but invisible, the way beauty and injustice coexist. We can see the tension between private ownership and public interest, the belief that property rights are sacred, but also the recognition that private actions have public consequences. We can see the challenge of accountability in a society where the rich and powerful can afford the best lawyers, the best PR, the best defenses, and where the rest of us are left to hope that institutions and laws will hold. We can see the environmental reckoning on the horizon, the reality that no amount of money can buy immunity from climate change, that nature doesn't care about your net worth or your political influence. And we can see the polarization that defines our era, the way the same place, the same story, the same set of facts can be interpreted in completely opposite ways depending on who you are and what you believe. Mar-a-Lago is a test of our values, a test of our institutions, a test of whether we can hold power accountable, protect workers and communities, preserve history, and confront the future honestly. And so far, we're not doing great on that test. Here are the questions Mar-a-Lago leaves us with, questions that don't have easy answers, but that we need to keep asking. Should private clubs be able to function as sites of political power? When Mar-a-Lago became the Winter White House, it blurred the line between private and public in ways that made a lot of people uncomfortable. Is that acceptable? Should there be stricter rules about where and how presidents conduct official business? Or is it their right to choose? Who should bear the cost of protecting powerful people? Taxpayers fund Secret Service protection, even when former presidents live in private clubs and conduct business that benefits their personal brands. Is that fair? Should there be limits on public funding for private security? Or is it a necessary cost of democracy? How do we balance historic preservation with private ownership? Mar-a-Lago is architecturally significant, but it's also privately owned and commercially operated. Should there be restrictions on what owners can do with historic properties? Or does ownership mean the right to use property as you see fit? What do we owe workers in luxury industries? The people who make Mar-a-Lago run, the cooks, cleaners, gardeners, are essential, but often undervalued. What protections, wages, and recognition do they deserve? And who is responsible for ensuring they get it? Owners, governments, consumers? How do we confront climate change when the wealthy can delay consequences? Mar-a-Lago is at risk from rising seas, but Trump has the resources to build seawalls, repair damage, and delay the reckoning. Meanwhile, low-income coastal communities face immediate, devastating impacts. How do we create a fair response to climate change when the costs and consequences are so unevenly distributed? Can democracy survive when wealth buys access to power? Mar-a-Lago, as a club, sold access to the president. Is that corruption? Is it just the way the world works? And if we don't like it, what do we do about it? These questions don't have simple answers, but they're the right questions, and Mar-a-Lago forces us to confront them. In 1927, Marjorie Merriweather Post stood on the grounds of her newly completed estate and looked out at the ocean. She had built something extraordinary, a palace, a dream, a statement. She believed it would last forever. She couldn't have imagined what Mar-a-Lago would become. A gift rejected, a property sold, a club created, a political symbol, a crime scene, a flashpoint in a national reckoning over wealth, power, and accountability. Mar-a-Lago has always been more than a mansion. From the beginning, it was a tool used by Marjorie to force her way into society, used by Trump to project success and power, used by members to buy access and status. And it has always been a mirror, reflecting back the ambitions, the contradictions, the inequalities of the society that built it. Today, Mar-a-Lago stands at a crossroads. Legally, politically, environmentally, it faces an uncertain future. It could become a shrine, a museum, a ruin, or something else entirely. But whatever happens to the building, the questions it raises will remain. Questions about who builds and who benefits, about who pays the cost and who reaps the rewards, about what we value, beauty or justice, privacy or transparency, tradition or accountability. Questions about what it means to be wealthy in a democracy, about what we owe each other, about what kind of society we want to be. Mar-a-Lago doesn't give us answers. It gives us a story, complex, uncomfortable, unfinished. And it's up to us to decide what that story means. Do we see Mar-a-Lago as a symbol of American achievement, a testament to ambition, entrepreneurship, and the freedom to build something grand? Or do we see it as a symbol of American inequality, a monument to the concentration of wealth, the exploitation of labor, and the blurring of public and private power? Do we see it as a place that should be preserved, celebrated, protected? Or do we see it as a place that should be scrutinized, regulated, held accountable? The answer depends on who you are, what you value, what you believe about wealth, power, and justice. But here's what we know for sure. Mar-a-Lago is not neutral. It never has been. It's a house that demands answers. A house that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. A house that reflects the best and worst of who we are. So let's end where we began, with a question. What is the legacy of Mar-a-Lago? Is it the beauty of the architecture, the gold leaf, the hand-carved stone, the imported marble? The vision of a woman who built something extraordinary and wanted it to last forever? Is it the entrepreneurial hustle? The way Trump turned a failing estate into a profitable club, a brand, a symbol of success? Is it the political drama? The winter White House, the classified documents, the FBI search, the indictment? The way a mansion became the center of a constitutional crisis? Is it the inequality, the invisible workers, the taxpayer-funded security, the club members who bought access to power? The reminder that luxury always comes at a cost, and someone else usually pays it? Is it the environmental warning, the seawalls that won't hold forever, the ocean that keeps rising, the future where even the grandest palaces may be reclaimed by nature? Or is it all of these things, woven together, inseparable, each layer revealing something true about America? Marjorie Merriweather Post built Mar-a-Lago to prove she belonged, to prove she mattered, to leave something behind. She succeeded. Mar-a-Lago will be remembered, but not the way she imagined. It will be remembered not just as a beautiful estate, but as a contested space, a symbol of ambition and exploitation, of beauty and burden, of power and its costs. It will be remembered as a house that asked more questions than it answered, a house that reflected the contradictions of the American dream, the possibility and the inequality, the grandeur and the greed, the aspiration and the reckoning. And maybe that's the most honest legacy of all. Because America, like Mar-a-Lago, is not one thing. It's a tangle of competing stories, competing values, competing visions of who we are and who we want to be. Mar-a-Lago holds all of those contradictions in one place. And it challenges us to decide, which story do we want to tell? Which future do we want to build? The mansion can't answer those questions. Only we can. So the next time you see Mar-a-Lago in the news, another scandal, another storm, another headline, don't just see a building. See the workers who keep it running. See the taxpayers who fund the security. See the neighbors who live in its shadow. See the ocean that's slowly rising toward its gates. See the history, the ambition, the labor, the wealth, the power, the consequences. See the questions it raises about who we are, what we value, what we owe each other. And ask yourself, what do I want Mar-a-Lago to mean? Because in the end, the story of Mar-a-Lago is not just about a mansion. It's about us.